Hello, this is a video for the Unit 3 paper for English language. Now, a lot of my videos on this very subject are sort of a little bit outdated because, well, not outdated, the information is still relevant, but a lot of them were sort of during COVID when we were able to have additional information and we were able to sort of tell you the kind of things that may come up on the papers. But obviously, you've not really had that luxury for the last 2 years. So obviously, we've already had the Unit 2 paper, and a lot of you watched my videos on Unit 2, and probably felt hopefully quite comfortable by the end of watching those. But I'm going to go over Unit 3 here because I get a lot of requests going over like specific question types and how to sort of structure them. So I'm going to go over the questions that I think will appear, because obviously we've already seen the first paper. We know what they asked on there, which were things like synthesis, what impressions, and so on. When it comes to this next paper now, they're probably going to ask you a how question. They tend to ask on both papers, and if they don't ask on one, they're almost certainly going to ask you on another. They will certainly ask you a comparison question, and I've got a feeling they'll ask you a summary as well. So I'm just going to go through them. Now, first of all, I'm just going to stop sharing this for a second because I've actually put on the wrong bit, which is the writing section. But I'll go over the different sections as we go. So just going to reshare that now. So first of all, for how questions then, just to keep this in mind as you go through it, focus on methods or processes. So questions for how questions tend to ask you how to explain how something is done or achieved, okay? Break down the techniques that are used. So for example, short sentences, descriptive language, sentence structure, and also specific techniques such as alliteration and so on, if the question allows it. Don't just technique spot. So don't just say, oh, they use alliteration here. You need to explain why that may persuade you or why that may be important to the overall question. And also provide specific quotations from the text to show how those methods contribute to the overall effect, okay? One thing that I would say for every single question, there's always something called a buzzword. And the way I describe it to my students is a buzzword is a word in the question that they're asking you to specifically focus on. So for example, if it said, how does the writer describe the benefits of using the NHS? Your buzzword is benefits, which means you're looking specifically for the benefits in the question. If you don't mention benefits, you're very unlikely to get the mark. Okay, so I'll give you an example, right? This is a portion from a full marker that was that came from the WJEC a little while ago. And I've got on the side there some color coding, okay? So a point that links directly to the question, quotes/words, so evidence, picked out from the text and embedded, techniques and devices that are useful to analyze, and analysis, okay? So using the verb, using your analysis verbs to deconstruct it. So for example, in text C, the brochure states there are 825 square miles of skyscraping peaks. This persuades the reader to explore it as there's a huge range of landscapes to be visited. And I believe the question was surrounding what makes the reader want to explore. So obviously using that word here, okay? And again, they're using the word explore here. So that kind of structure, you should try to make 8 to 10 points if it's 8 to 10 marks. But a how question could be anything from 4 marks onwards. Okay, the WJEC just sort of make it up as they go along when it comes to how much the questions are weighted. Okay, so that's how questions. Comparison questions. You're identifying the similarities and differences between two things being compared. We have had synthesis with 3 texts. I believe once we had a comparison with 3 texts. So just be aware of that. Instead of making 5 whole points where you like compare the 2 texts, so technically I suppose you're making 10 points in total, but if it's a 3 text answer, you would do 3 big points covering each of the texts in each of those 3 points. So technically you're making 9 points at that point. Be clear about how each point relates to both subjects being compared. You may want to organize your answer using the number method to have a balance of the 2 texts, and I'll sort of go over the number method in just a second. And then use examples from the text to support your own comparison. So first of all, this is an example of it. And this question was specifically about disfigurement, and it was 2 different texts that cover the topic of disfigurement. The writers present their dealings with disfigurement very differently. In text A, the writer refers to her old self by saying he almost succeeded in extinguishing the loss of the old Katie, almost. The use of repetition tells us that her personality is still there but is almost gone. In contrast, text B refers to the elephant man as a dog, which dehumanizes him using this harsh noun. So you can see how I've mentioned both text A by here, and then I mentioned text B here, and I've connected with a word like in contrast, for example, okay, to make sure that they know it's a comparison. All right, for summary questions, you're condensing the information, and so by identifying the most important points and leaving out any unnecessary details. You use your own words to restate the main ideas without copying any phrases from the texts. And please use bullet points and ensure the question is answered when you use those bullet points. So a lot of centres say like don't recommend you use bullet points. When we went to conference and we spoke to the WJEC, pretty much all of their model answers had bullet points, and they were actually capping students if they didn't use them. So please use bullet points for your summaries, okay? So, for example, if we look at this article on drug and cosmetic firms back plans to cut animal testing, there's a section that says opponents of vivisection have long argued that animals are poor models for testing drugs and products that will be used by humans because their biology is different. In my own words, many people have argued that testing on animals isn't very useful as they are different genetically to humans. Yeah, so that's a point that's in my own words. I've used a bullet point and I've just made that point. Okay, so those are the three question types that could potentially come up. I forget if what impressions came up because I don't actually have the paper in front of me, but you know, my other videos have covered what impressions questions, so I'm hoping that's going to be enough. Now, in terms of writing, now Unit 3 writing types. Please, for all of them, use advanced punctuation and adventurous vocabulary. So advanced punctuation would count as things like semicolons, dashes, colons, technically exclamation marks and question marks less so, but exclamation marks would count. Try to use them as much as you can. You need a variety of sentence types. Don't just use the same sentence structure all the time. Don't start all of your sentences with the word the. You're not going to get anywhere with that. They will cap you. They are incredibly brutal on the writing section, far more brutal than I would be, which is why they're probably marking it and I'm not. But the not varying your sentence types will cap you out and they will be very harsh on it. When the WJEC mark it and when people mark it, you actually have to flag up. If you find a band 5 answer to your supervisor, you've got to flag it up and somebody has got to check it because it is so rare for them to give out band 5s, which is utterly ridiculous. You should aim for roughly 2 to 2.5 pages of writing. And the reason I say that is because you've got to write 2 of them. You've got to write 2 20 markers. So in your exposition or description that you did in the last one, you were probably aiming for about 4 to 5 pages. So you should aim for about half that for each of those for your 20 markers. And I usually say to aim for 5 paragraphs with an intro and conclusion to go with it. And those intro and conclusions can be quite short. So I'm going to go through each of the Unit 3 writing types that could come up. I've specifically left out reviews from this because a review came up last year and I highly doubt they'll ask it to you again. But on the off chance that they do, I might briefly go over it at the end, okay? So first of all, articles. Use headings and subheadings to divide up your work, okay? An article always has a bold heading and it always has subheadings to divide it up. Some more modern articles, like online articles, don't use subheadings, but for this traditional kind of article, I would recommend using subheadings. Change your tone depending on the audience. So if you're writing for a teen audience, you need to have a tone that accommodates that. If it's for communities or your local area or your local school, please make sure that you're using more formalized language and that you're considering that. The WJEC love it when you consider the audience, okay? And then finally, use adventurous vocabulary to develop your response along with a variety of sentence structures just to make it more interesting, okay? So that's articles. Letters. Upper right, your address. Lower left, their address, okay? So your address goes in the upper right, you're the most important, and the lower left is their address, okay? And that is how you structure a letter. They will see that that looks like a letter immediately and they'll tick it, okay? If you're like, oh my God, should I put down my real address? If you want to, it's up to you. You can just make up an address. Do you know their address? Who knows? Just make it up, okay? Number 2, if you're writing an informal letter, so this doesn't often happen, but if they do ask you to write a letter for a friend, for example, they say, write a letter to your friend explaining why, that's technically an informal letter, which means you don't need to include your address, okay? I would probably still include theirs, but you probably don't need to include yours because your friend is likely to know where the letter came from. And your opening should lay out why you are writing and what you hope to achieve, okay? So what is it you're writing to them about and what are you trying to achieve by that? Now, that even applies to an informal letter, but obviously you do it in a little bit more of an informal way. Okay, reports. Now, this one has never come up, not once, okay? Which means I feel it in my bones that we may get a report this year, considering we're coming to the end of the life of the spec. Reports are by far the most boring writing type that you'll ever be asked to do. It will drive you insane. It will probably make you put your head down on the desk when you're doing this exam, but please, young student, continue because it's not that hard, okay? It's very unusually structured, okay? You have 4 paragraphs technically, and they're quite chunky paragraphs. You've got an intro, problems, solutions, conclusion. So what that means is if they ask you to write a report on the state of children's facilities in your local area, some of the problems with those may be that those facilities may be abused, or that people may not want to go there because they deem it quote unquote cringy, etc., etc. Okay. Solutions are what you're suggesting could be a way to overcome those issues. And within problems and solutions, you ideally need some kind of evidence. That could be that you've interviewed members of the community, or you've got statistics that back up what you're saying. And then to conclude, you obviously just want to make sure that they try and follow through on whatever proposals that you're suggesting in your solutions. Okay. With a report, all language must be formal. You have to speak formally when it comes to a report. It is a formal document, and they will mark you down and dock you on content marks. And technically, they could dock you on accuracy too. But you need to try and use adventurous vocabulary that fits formally. So don't use it over the top words that may not fit in a report. Think of adventurous vocabulary that would fit into a conversation that you could have with your nan. Yeah. The title should be quite matter of fact. So, for example, a report into littering on Welsh beaches. Very boring, but that's how you do it, okay? So, like I said, I feel in my bones, either this year or next year, I think we'll get reports just because they haven't put it on yet and the spec is about to die. So they're likely to throw in the ringer, just random ones. And my evidence for that is that they chucked a review in last year and not a lot of people expected a review, okay? Leaflets, okay, written images to be used. And what I mean by written images is when you're constructing your leaflet, do not fold the pages of your exam paper to make a leaflet. That is stupid. When you're doing written images, what I mean is you draw a box and then you write within that box what image you would like to go there. So, for example, if your leaflet is advertising your local area, you may want to have an image of, say, a famous restaurant that's nearby. You might write down an image of restaurant or something like that within a little box. And then you can do your writing so that it sort of wraps around that image, and that's totally fine. Don't make them too big, so don't like take up massive piles of the work because they won't necessarily mark it. They're still marking your written content, but you're demonstrating by having those written images that you understand leaflets are they're meant to be quite presentable and beautiful. Yeah. It's a similar style to an article. It just has added images, and I would recommend using subheadings to divide each section to make sure it looks good. Okay. For talks, written as if you're going to speak it. Okay. So everything should be direct address, and you should try and engage with the audience in this speech. Okay. You're obviously not going to stand up and speak it, but it's as if you were going to speak it. Techniques to inspire or engage your audience, okay? So think back to all of those writing techniques, and I'll go over a couple of them in a minute, that you could use to inspire your audience, okay? And also change your writing style depending on the audience. This is more important for a talk than anything because you're meant to be delivering it, so you need to understand your audience. Guides. Okay, now guides, I can't remember if guides have come up. I don't think they have, so this could be another red flag one. But it's the same as an article, except your language is just very instructional. So you're telling somebody what to do. All of your subheadings should start with steps, like step 1, dash, and then tell me what that step 1 is, okay? So that way you're giving instructions the whole time. You're being very imperative. You have to be as commanding as you can. You need to. You must. To continue, it is important that you, and so on. Language should be relatively basic, but you can still be as adventurous as possible with the vocabulary. Just don't overdo it. Guides are meant to be using simplistic language because the person doesn't understand what's going on, and that's why they're reading a guide, okay? Now, I defy anyone to challenge me on that, but in terms of your written ability, you still need to include adventurous vocab. Just don't overdo it, okay? And that is sort of like the end of that. Now, a review, as I said, I just quickly go over a review, just in case it does come up again, but it came up last year. A review is where you're essentially giving your opinion and judgment on something. So make sure one of the defining features for a review is make sure that you use a star rating or like some kind of rating to make sure that it looks like a review. And also things like tongue-in-cheek noun phrases, which is where you combine an adjective with a noun to make it its own sort of thing. So for example, if I said tempestuous Mike, I'd be calling this person tempestuous, and it would sort of make the entire thing flow and make it more interesting to read. Okay, so that would be what I would do for reviews. Now I'm going to stop sharing this bit because I'm going to show you another thing. Now I'll leave this on the screen for a little bit while I talk about it. But if anyone would like this and wants me to send it to them, I will do so. But this is one of my writing placemats for English Language Unit 3. So it gives you some adverbials and connectives that you can use at the top, gives you intentions. So like what this reinforces, this undermines, this validates, and so on. Introductions, so as revealed by, for example, as shown when. And I've got here a little bit of a quick guide to writing some of these specific things that you can read. And also just down by here, I've got techniques that you could use that would extend your answers and make them better. I'm not going to go through each and every one, but I'll leave this here so you can pause the video if you want just to read some of them. I've got the audience focus here and also the kind of basic spag that they would be expecting for you, okay? So I'll leave that there. And if you want to pause the video, feel free to read them. But other than that, this is all done. I will see you next time and good luck on the exam.